and welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the vlogcast that gives you a peek inside the minds of some truly inspirational teachers. During this final episode of Season 1, I sit down for a chat with Shannen Doherty, a teacher and assistant head teacher in London, who shares her experience of teaching, her school leadership values, and gives us exclusive access to her new book, 100 Ideas for Primary Teachers, Maths. Whether you're new to teaching or a school leader with tons of experience, this interview is a must listen. And if you happen to be listening on your preferred podcast provider, don't miss out on the extended cut in which Shannen takes on the national curriculum tier list, ranking some of the national curriculum's most intriguing and often controversial requirements. Full interviews are available from the Thinking Deeply About Primary Mathematics YouTube channel or thinkingdeeply.info, where full show notes and references can be found. Without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary education. So, Shannen, welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
We always start with the teachers and numbers, just to get to know a little bit about them. And your first one is years as a teacher.
6.
Number of schools?
3.
Last year group taught?
2.
Favourite year group?
I don't think I can answer it. Is there a rule that says I have to give an answer? Because I don't know if I can. They're good for different reasons. That's all I've got.
You can have one fence sit.
That's my fence sit.
Most important year group?
1.
Tweets?
The worst thing about this is everyone who has been on has gone, oh, it's embarrassingly high. It's like 6,000. It's so many. And mine is 30.6 thousand. And I have no excuse for it other than I think I've been doing it maybe longer than some. And I think I do it more often than many. And I think, in that's like your replies as well and stuff, isn't it? So people tag me in things, I reply. Otherwise, I'd be impolite. And I pride myself on being polite. So it averages out at about 21 a day, which is fine. No, I'm fine with it.
You're usually involved in quite healthy discussions about education. So I think it's good.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter that it's 10 times as many as
It's madness, isn't it? How does it get to be so many? Yeah, well, there you go.
So you're currently a senior leader responsible for mathematics and teacher at a school in London. Tell us about your journey and how you got here.
So in year 4, age 7, I decided that age 8? How old are you in year 4? That's bad. 8. I know how old children are in primary school. Aged 8, I had a teacher called Miss Stanton, who I thought was the coolest person in the world. And she wore denim hot pants and like high heels to school every day. And I thought that's the epitome of cool. And once I saw her she was really stressed. And I saw her go into a cupboard. And the year 6 teacher, Mr. East, went in there and he gave her a kiss. And I remember going home and being like, what is this? What is this job? And I thought it was a cool job. And I thought, she looks happy. That could be something I would do. And then I kind of just always said it in my head. And I went through years of being like, I'll be a dolphin trainer at the weekend and I'll be a maths teacher Monday to Friday. And then, as you do in year 10, I did work experience in a primary school and I really liked it. And then I did work experience in year 12 in a secondary school and I did not really like it. And I was in a drama department, mainly because I hadn't been bothered to look for work experience. And my drama teacher said, just come and be with us for the 2 weeks. And my friend and I both did it and I just couldn't stand it. I have so much respect for secondary school teachers. They do a wonderful job. I just can't be around the teenagers. I can't take it. And then, so before I went to university, I decided to take a year out because I was pretty dead set on being a teacher. And I thought, if I'm going to spend from the age of like 5 to whenever I retire in education of some sort, you know, as a student or a teacher, I should probably take a year out and just enjoy life. And so I took a year out and I carried on working at Waitrose, where I'd been working for a few years. And I TA'd part-time, and that was really good because obviously I got to be in a school a couple of days a week. Did some other jobs like bar work, and I was a receptionist at a sports club, and I was very, you know, certain that teaching was the way for me. Then I went to Greenwich and I did a 3-year degree in education studies, which people at the time were like, what is this joke degree you're doing? And I'd have idiot uncles being like, you're going to uni to learn about education? Oh, it's ridiculous. But actually, like, it genuinely fascinated me. And I had like these eccentric lecturers who were lefty as anything, and they had the most crazy views, and they taught us so much stuff. And we looked at all the background and sort of the foundation of schools in the UK and the history of education and, you know, all the psychology behind it and how children learn. And it like genuinely laid the groundwork for me to become a teacher. So even though it was a bit of a joke degree and people laughed and I only had like 8 hours of lectures a week, I loved it, and I enjoyed it. And then after that, I went back to Greenwich and did my PGCE with Elliot Morgan, who I, you know, didn't know at the time, but it's come out that apparently we were on the PGCE together. And it was, looking back on it, probably not the best teacher training, no offence to the people at Greenwich. Some of them did a wonderful job, but looking at what we know now, I don't think it really cuts the mustard, but what can you do? And I did a couple of really like opposite placements. I did one at a school called Lancelot, which was in the heart of Lewisham. Very interesting children, very interesting families. You know, there were fights, every swear word under the sun I heard on my first day, but I properly fell in love with it. After about a week, I was like, oh, well, I will work here. I love it here. And my mentor went off on long-term leave. So we ended up being the teacher with another student. So we literally, in our second week of our placement, became the teachers. Not right at all. You would not do that now. You would not let 2 students who were on their first placement and have never taught a group, let alone a whole class, run a class. We had the PPA teacher would come in the afternoon and do a bit of sort of history while we had some time out, but it was eye-opening. And, you know, I know that my teaching was probably absolute rubbish, but I learned, I guess, a lot because I had to learn a lot. And my friends were sort of teaching groups and observing lessons, and they might have the odd full lesson, whereas I was just, you know, a teacher for 11 weeks, which was bonkers. But like I said, I loved it. And we had like, our tutors would come in and be like, this is not the right situation for 2 students who are this early in their training. And we'd go, yeah, you're probably right. However, we like it and we want to stick with it. And we had the nightmare class, and we'd been put in there as extra bodies, obviously, but they were crazy. And I remember having an observation, and 2 of them literally had a fist fight at the end of it. And I was like, I've taught this wonderful maths lesson, and then you've just lined up for assembly and you've erupted into this fight. But I really liked it there. And then I went off to another placement, and it was not Lancelot. It was very different. The children were the complete opposite. And I kind of worked out that I didn't want to work in that kind of environment, even though they were lovely. And I saw a lot of good practice there, and I learned a lot there. It wasn't for me. So I kept kind of hounding the head teacher at Lancelot for a job. I would pop in every now and then because I'd made really good relationships with like the TA I had, who would fall asleep in every lesson, but she was lovely. And so I'd pop in and see her. And then I'd knock on the head teacher's door and say, you know, have you got any vacancies yet? can I come for an interview yet? Because I have no shame. And eventually there was a vacancy, and I did my interview, and I managed to get it. And I was over the moon to be working at Lancelot. And so I did my NQT year there, was year group partner with my best friend, Jen, who is Miss Doll Teacher on Twitter, and like learned so much from her, and owe her a lot, really, because she really did a lot that year, far more than I imagine anyone should have to do. But she kind of just held me together, and she did so much stuff. And then in my second year there, I did an intense maths mastery course with the South East London Maths Hub, and that was just insane. It was so good, and I'd always loved maths. I was always a massive nerd at school, but that course just opened my eyes, and I was like, well, this is where I need to go. This is what I need to do. And my maths lead at the time, Andrew Squirrel, lovely man, he was just incredible and would let me come and bug him, and he would let me do little bits of staff meetings, and he wouldn't mind if I came and asked him questions. And I think I would still be at that school if I hadn't moved. So I bought a house at the end of my NQT year with my then partner, and it was like the commute was just getting too much. It was like 45 minutes in the morning, over an hour on the way home. I just couldn't hack that anymore, because I was working long days, as you do in your early years of being a teacher. And I had to find somewhere else. And so I managed to find a job nearer to my new house at a school called New Valley. And there I worked for Sally Dubban, who is just the best maths guru other than you that I know. She just knows so much, and she was part of the Maths Hub, and she went off to Shanghai in my first term there, and I was just so jealous, and I just was like, I want to be her when I grow up. And she would let me do loads of stuff with her, and she was in charge of her TRG, and so I would have about 14 teachers come and observe me like every half term teaching maths, and that was brilliant. It was terrifying, but now I can have someone walk into my classroom and I'm not panicked because I've had 14 people sit there. And that gave me sort of the opportunity to sit and talk through my maths planning and all of my decision making, and why I said that and why I used that image. And that, I think, really put me in a good place for moving on to lead maths. I ended up not being overly happy there towards the end of my time. And so I was very luckily offered the chance to come and work at another school for a January start. And I never thought I'd leave a school at Christmas. You know that thing of when you're early in your career and you go, oh, well, I'd never leave mid-year. I couldn't do that to the children. But then you realise that actually they will get over it and they'll move on. So I left at Christmas and I went to work at my current school, which is St John's, which is part of the Aquinas Trust. And we have 11 schools, 9 in Bromley and 2 in Rye, really randomly. 9 of the schools are Church of England, which is brand new for me. I'd never worked in a faith school before, so that's really interesting. And I took on maths sort of as I'd settled in. I was in year 4 in lovely class. The school was on a bit of a turnaround journey, so that was nice to be part of. And then we got Ofsted in July, something like the 5th of July or something, and we were not expecting them. And it was genuinely a huge shock. And I'd gone through Ofsted at Lancelot, so I kind of knew a little bit, but it was just before the new framework was starting. So they were kind of experimenting with certain questions. So when I went in for my maths grilling and they were asking me sort of deep divey questions, I was just like, I don't want to be here. Why is this me? I took maths on 2 months ago and I started here in January. Please don't hold me responsible for anything you're seeing. And I was very much like, everything I'm putting in place is for September. This is what it will look like, but I don't have that for you right now. But they were lovely, and we managed to get good. So, and that was our first good in, I think, 21 years. So it's a big journey. And then obviously lockdown happened last year and now this year, and life's just a bit strange, but that's me done, I think. Probably talked for like an hour about me.
No, that's the most action-packed intro anyone's done so far. So, really the other guests should be ashamed.
They should be ashamed of themselves, quite frankly.
What have they been doing with their lives and their time, really? A few classics in there. The didn't organize a place to go, so ended up going to the school. Work experience is something I've forgotten, but that's an absolute classic.
It is, isn't it?
But on a serious note, I think everybody needs a Jen in their first year.
Oh, they do.
It's so intense. I'm still really good friends with my mentor, and he did the exact same thing. He made sure that I was, surviving essentially.
Exactly.
And he still.
It was wonderful. And she would have her leadership time on a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd have my NQT time, and we had PPA in the morning. So we literally had Tuesday all day out of class together, and we just developed the best bond to the point where come April, we were booking a holiday in our PPA as a research for our travel agents topic. And we were like, well, we have to go on a recce to the Mediterranean. So we booked a holiday together. But I totally credit her with surviving my NQT year. She's a good one.
I think if anyone's in that position and they can be a Jen, I think they should absolutely go for it and be that rock that.
Agreed.
Because I think it's called quite a few times. That first year's tough, but we need as many teachers making it through as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also I had to pull you up on the Ofsted story, because from what I heard, you did a very good job in that interview with them. So I think you're downplaying, exactly how much hard work went into that, and what a great result that was what a great outcome that was for the school. So
yeah, it was very good, but terrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I think I've definitely said this before. They've been really open to listening this last 3-4 years. My experience. So I think every time.
And I think we saw that at Lancelot as well. Because the head teacher started at the same time that I started, and she had been told that the school was on the brink of outstanding. And it was the opposite. We were, requires improvement at best. And she walked in and was like, oh, this is not the on the brink of outstanding school that I had signed up for. And so then, we had Ofsted in my second year. Yeah, in my second year, I think about halfway through. And we just started like no written feedback. And they came, and the HMI basically was like, what good would come from me giving you requires improvement when I can see that you are making moves? And listened to everything that they were saying, and just sort of said, me giving you RI will not be good for you. You are clearly making moves and making progress to being a good school. And that kind of mentality, I think, is really important with the inspectors, to know that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel that we are heading towards, and not just that we've been in a bit of a bad situation or had a couple of years of bad data.
So let's go into the classroom then. What would the 4 most prominent features of a Shannon lesson be?
Well, what I will say as like a disclaimer before I start this is that I've listened to the other interviews, and everyone has taken my answers. And I had, when we heard the first one and we heard Lloyd's podcast, and, that's a question that you're going to ask, I started to tick ideas over in my head and think, what would my 4 be? And I had a long list, and one by one, they've all been taken, which I think is probably what happens when you come so late and you're at the end. So, there are things that would be on my list. I've tried not to copy too much, but I am also aware that we all do similar things. And probably that's for the best, that we all do a similar thing and we all see those as like good practice. So my first one is like high quality modelling. And I know this has been spoken about, but that sort of I do, we do, you do approach. And I know you and Neil Alma talked about the silent teacher. And I think that's just so important, you know, doing whatever you're doing and showing them that, hey, you can actually be fluent at this. And you know, often with mine, if it's some sort of procedure, you know, I'll show them me doing it at my speed that I'm doing it. And I'll be like, this will be you. You just need to follow what I'm doing, you know, and I'll show them at speed and then I'll slow right down and they will start to see what I'm doing. And I'm not talking. I'm not expecting them to listen to what I'm saying and watch what I'm doing, because that's hard. People don't tend to do that very well, particularly not children. So I do that sort of silent teacher approach, and I, you know, will draw their attention to things, and then we'll start to pick it apart, and then I'll start to explain the thought process, and we'll do some together, create those kind of like worked examples, and you know, they will eventually have a go, and they, you know, they might have more than one go. We might go through the process again and again and again. Some will go off and start. One of those tips that I love, and I think we all loved it when we heard it, was the mini whiteboard tip from Matt Swain at STEP. And I think he said it at Fluid Maths, and it was like, you show one line at a table or one pod of tables at a time. And I was like, oh, that's genius. Why have I never considered this? Instead of the whole class holding it up and you're like desperately trying to see what they've all said. And so that, you know, I incorporate that kind of into my I do, we do, you do. And actually, you know, my children are so used to it now, and I always do it in the same order. So they just do it for me, which is wonderful. Yeah, so that's sort of I do, we do, you do, modelling, scaling it back, really showing that thought process and actually drawing their attention to the really important bits and the why you're doing it, and not just going, well, this is column addition and I'm just going to do it again, and I'll do it again, and then I'll do it again, and eventually you'll just learn it because you've watched me so many times, because that is not a successful approach. And I think we need more of this sort of really broken down modelling. And I work with a teacher she's here from Canada, and she's lovely, Natalie, and she's, you know, early in her career. And that's one of the things that we've sort of talked about, is just you can't model too much, just model it for them. And if it means that you've had that kind of like shared experience for a lot of the lesson, but then they can go off and do it, that's far more beneficial and a better use of your time than doing like 3 examples at the front and then off you go. So yeah, that's my first one, which I think lots of people would agree with. If we're going from a maths point of view, which seems to make sense since it's the two of us, then I would talk a lot about representation and structures, which I know Lisa talked about as well. Like I said, I found it hard not to duplicate these ideas, but I could talk for so long about this because I love talking about representations. I love talking about CPA and the use of manipulatives and what they should be used for and what they shouldn't be used for. And I've had like lengthy debates with people about whether you should just put all the resources out and let them go wild, or if you should really pick carefully what you're using. And I did a talk at my trust conference, actually. We have these wonderful conferences every year where teachers do seminars, and I was asked to do one on maths, and I decided to do one on manipulatives and what manipulatives to use for what and why, and not to just get everything you have out and expect them to use them. At some point, there will be children who can do that, and you can have a tray of resources and they'll go, oh, do you know what, I'm going to use that for this problem because I know that will work. But it takes a long time to get there, and you have to explicitly teach how to use things. And I'm going to talk a little bit about structures more probably later, but I think more schools are a bit probably more au fait with using manipulatives and sort of edging towards maybe using some high quality images. But I think we think less about structures. I think that is something we probably need to work on as a profession. I don't think that many people are that well versed in what the different structures of calculations are, or what that looks like, or how you can model that best. So that's something that I really like working on, and I would love to work on some more if I can get back into school. But I am working from home, so I can't. But I think one thing that's really important with the representation structures, you just can't take anything for granted. You can't assume that the children understand, or the teachers that you're training, you can't assume that they understand why a tens frame is called a tens frame. That sounds really stupid and you think it's obvious. But if you just give something a name and don't relate any meaning to it, then they'll just start using the words tens frame and have no idea. And so I spent a lot of time with mine being like, why is it called a tens frame? Shall we count the parts? And think, how many counters can we put on here until it's full? And if it's full, what is it? How many is it? And I just don't think you can do enough of that. Same with the bead string, like emphasizing that they are in tens, or like a reckon rec, it's in fives. You can't do enough of that. What seems like you are teaching Granny how to suck eggs, but actually, it's invaluable. And so in the majority of my lessons, there is some representational structure highlighted. Obviously, at some point, you want to get away from manipulatives, and the goal is that they can do it without them. But for the most part, they're there. And even if it's just that retrieval of like, do you remember yesterday when we used this? We're going to try not to use it today, but it's there if you need it, kind of thing. And that, I think, would help develop that sort of like innate numberness that many of them don't have, and that we need to kind of forge a little. That's my second one, which I'm sure you'll agree with, being you.
100%.
My third one has also been talked about, and I think it's been talked about like 3 times, and it's cold calling. And this is one for me that, as far as I can tell, isn't happening like as a rule in many schools. I think if we were like flies on the wall, we probably wouldn't see a lot of it. We'd probably see a lot of hands up, asking the same hands, because it's the easy thing to do and we've all done it. But I think it's really valuable. And I think, that kind of expectation of, I will ask any of you, you all need to be prepared, but also without putting on the pressure and giving them that anxiety. I know Chris talked about that before, and about sort of the way you put yourself in their shoes and you say, oh, I made that mistake as well. I'm so glad you did that. And making sure that that's your culture in your classroom. But I think that misconception of cold calling puts them under pressure, and it's high stress, and it gives them anxiety, is so wrong. I just think you need to have that developed in your classroom, and you need to say that, we're all taking part. I have a small class. I need them all to take part. Otherwise, it's just the same 2 children putting their hands up all the time, and it's not fair. And you can't have that that mentality of, I can sit back because so-and-so is really smart and he'll just listen, put his hand up and he'll answer, and then I don't need to tune in. They need to pay attention or they'll never learn. And so I do think, if you've got the right ethos and your environment in your classroom is right, then it's the better form of questioning. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, weirdly, as you do in your free time, you talk about, teaching and learning strategies. And I was talking about lolly sticks, and how when you start teaching, you have a pot of lolly sticks. And it was very much, you pick it up because then it's fair. And then, the children don't feel under pressure. And I remember at the time when I was in NQT, I was like, I don't want these lolly sticks. And I remember going, I think they're stupid. I don't want them. If I want to ask a child a question, I'll ask them a question. But I was asked to use lolly sticks. So I used the lolly sticks, but it was very much like, I'm pulling out a name. I'm not going to look at the name. I'm just going to say who I want to answer this question. Brilliant. And you don't know that. But it worked. But, I don't think there's any harm in saying to the children, this is cold calling. I don't expect your hands up, because that's not what we do in this room. And, I need to ask you questions because I need to constantly assess you, and I need to make sure that you know what I think you know, and that you haven't been sat there daydreaming. So I think it's a huge one for me, and it just helps you see like who is on board and who is on a different planet. And, that constant assessment needs to be part and parcel of your teaching. And then my fourth one, I sort of umming and ahhing about whether or not to include it, because it seems like an obvious one to me. But I think if you talk to some people, it's not still. I think we have this bubble of Twitter and conferences and our friendship groups, and we assume that everyone is the same as us. So my fourth one is live feedback and, in the moment marking. So like I said earlier, my first school, Lancelot, we introduced no written feedback at the start of my NQT plus 1 year. And I remember at the time kind of being like, it sounds great. I don't have to sit and do deep marking and expect the children to respond. It was like, okay, miss, thank you. And then you'd have to respond to that. Like, you're welcome. That ridiculous conversation you used to have in books. And we used to, I hope that no one minds me having a moan about this, but we used to skip a page in our English books purely for marking. I'm sure other schools have done this as well, but they would write on one side and then we'd write on like the nice fresh page side with the thick paper, and we'd highlight, and then we'd put a bit of that highlighter in the margin on the next page and then write what they needed to do. And that is just a madness when I think back to it. Firstly, the cost of books. Like, who has the money to only write on half of your book? That is just insane to me. But we used to do it, and we used to do it like 3 times a week in every subject. And so anyway, so we brought in the no written feedback, and it was based on that kind of EEF review, a marked improvement, I want to say it's called. And that was sort of my first insight into educational research, and sort of going, so people do research and then they produce these papers and then we read them and then we put them into practice. This is wonderful, being the nerd that I am. And so I remember, we were told about it in a staff meeting, and we were given the reference on the PowerPoint, and I went off and I was like, well, I'll go and Google this and I'll read it. And I did. And I remember being like, well, this makes sense. I know I'm only 2 years into this, but this is smart thinking. And so, like I said earlier, I have a small class. And so getting around them all is quite easy. And it's rare now that I don't have that time to pick up on someone who isn't getting it, because I'm around and I can see where they've gone way wrong. Obviously, you still get some children who are copying each other, which is a pain in the bum. But for the most part, I can see, if it's a genuine like slip or error and they've just written the wrong number, or they just miscounted once, or if there is like a deeper misconception that I haven't picked up on during my teaching, we deal with it there and then. And my TA is wonderful, and she does the same that I do. If we might have to sit and work with a couple of children at a time, but generally we can circulate the room and go, oh, you've done this, and start, ticking, because there is still that expectation that work is ticked currently, and which I'm not that fussed on, but that's neither here nor there. So it gets dealt with in the moment, and that feedback is there and then, and that we don't sit on it for a night. They don't have to come back to it the next day and go, I've got no idea what this is relating to. And so it's sort of like a no man is left behind ethos in our classrooms, because we expect it to be dealt with as much as possible in the lesson. And if it isn't doable, then it's a same day intervention, because you've been doing your live feedback and you're in the moment marking. So I think it's an important one for me. So that is my fourth one. But what I will say is that I was also tempted to include retrieval and multiple choice questions, which I think I'm sure we would have had a wonderful conversation about, and also the explicit teaching of language, but I chose not to. I chose to go with those 4. It was very hard.
It's like you're trying to sneak in everybody else's answer.
I know. This is my struggle.
The thing is, when you look at those 4, even yes, they've been said before, but when you put those 4 together, you've got the reason that there's a teacher in the classroom. You've got to try and transmit it, some sort of knowledge, some sort of understanding, some sort of learning. You've got to find out if that's worked, and then you've got to do something about it. And
absolutely.
I'm thinking back to year 1. When you ask a question, you're just trying to get to go to the next bit that's written on your lesson plan, and you're like, okay, let's go, let's get to the end. Whereas actually, if you're thinking about the behaviors you've described, you're thinking about what it is to be a teacher. Because and I think I said at Matt's conference, I'm rereading responsive teaching, and all of those things came through really strongly in that book. And it's almost like a guide for teachers, even with missteps along the way, towards that kind of thinking. And so I think that they could possibly be the strongest 4 suggestions because of how they work together. So
I'll take that.
But you can't sneak 5-6 more answers.
It's like, how many can I get away with?
So then, thinking bigger picture, how do you instigate change on a school-wide level?
So I've thought long and hard about this, and I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all approach. Had I had time today, I would have made a lovely flowchart, because I have this sort of mental flowchart going on in my head as I talk about it. And I think, it depends what the issue is, and it depends how bad it is, to, work out what your response should be and how you should try and develop whatever this area is. I think there are times that you have to sit back and just watch. And there are times where you have to consult the staff. And there are times where you just have to tell them and say, well, this is what we're doing. Deal with it, which isn't always the most popular approach, but there are times for it. So I think if you, for example, like behaviour, I think if behaviour is a nightmare and it's out of control, you have to come in and say, this is what we're doing. You are going to do this. These are the steps you are going to take. I need your cooperation with this. Obviously, we will work together, but we're starting it from tomorrow, because it's not, a long-term project. It's something that needs to be fixed now. And so, and I think generally teachers respond to that for that kind of issue. If it is behaviour, they will recognise that behaviour is an issue. Let's try and fix it. But if it's something else, something more meaty, not that behaviour is not meaty, but I do think behaviour is one that you can just go, this is what we're doing. Don't deviate from the plan, follow the policy. If I think it's something else, then you need to kind of think bigger. And I think if you are new to a school, I think Chris said this as well, if you're new to a school, you need to sit back and watch, and you need to actually work out what's happening. You need to get your bearings and an accurate picture of what's happening, because like I said earlier, my head came in and thought we were on the brink of outstanding, but she didn't. She had to sit back and go, oh, no, okay, I need to approach this differently. So you have to take the time to see what is wrong and what's right, and then work out what your moves are. But if you are, if it's just something like a school improvement project that you're doing in your school that you've been in for a while, and you recognise that something needs to change or you need to put something in place, then you don't have to obviously do that kind of observing step. You can just put your plan together. And I think a lot of teachers appreciate the consultation, where you go, well, what's working for you? What's not working for you? Why isn't it working? What would reduce your workload? What's the worst part about your job? That kind of thing. And I think in an ideal world, we'd always have those conversations, but we don't always have time for them. And I have been on both sides of it, where I've had to go in and be like, this is what we're doing. I haven't consulted anyone. Or, I'm the teacher in the meeting and sat there going, well, why the hell have they not asked us? Because this is the opposite of what I would want to do. And unfortunately, you just have to live with that. So you need to think about, what is your end goal here? What does, God tier of this thing look like? How are you going to get there? How long will it take? Reasonably, how long will it take? Not, we'll fix it by Christmas. And how will you know when it's genuinely embedded, and how will you know that, you can take your foot off the pedal a little bit because the teachers are doing it, it's ticking along, it's doing what you want it to do. I just said, you need to think realistically about how much time it will take. And I think you said this at MathsConf about, there are very few quick fixes in teaching and in like school leadership. There are, quick wins that you can do, but there are very few things that you can just fix overnight. And unfortunately, a lot of leaders are under pressure from whether it's, a trust or a local authority, and they're expected to whip something up, and they're expected to change data overnight. They're expected to whatever it might be. And so I think you need to have that middle ground of, I know that I'm under this pressure, but I can't then put that pressure onto my staff because I'm under this pressure. And that's unfortunately the deal when you're a leader. As far as I'm concerned, you get paid enough to handle that pressure, although that might be an unpopular opinion. And don't come and tell me I said that in 10 years' time when I'm under the pressure. So I think for me, like a successful approach is to trial something first. So if it's a curriculum change or a scheme of work or, whatever it might be, you need to have that like small case. You need to know that it works on this smaller level. You need to know that, year 1 and year 4 did it successfully, or 5 and 6 tried it and it worked really well. And then you have that time to experiment and really find your feet before you then take it school-wide, because there's nothing worse than saying, we're going to start this next week, everyone, all at once. No one knows what you're doing. And then you've just got one person who introduced it trying to fight all these fires, and everyone is finding their feet at the same time. So if you trial it, those people should generally be your team players. You've got your sort of early adopters, the people that know it works, and the people that will have your back when you then go to roll it out to the rest of the school. So then you can start to, open up that discussion, show them it works in wherever you trialed it. Where's the evidence? You can share research with them. You have to do a little bit of selling then, I think. It's not a case of you can say, well, we're doing this now because we've done it in year 1, so you're now going to do it in year 4. You have to sell it. You have to show them why it's going to pay off. Where is the benefit? And what, staff need a bit of a buy-in, like what's going to come out of this for them? Because generally, when there's a change, staff can be resistant because it looks like more work to start with. If you're changing something that you've been doing for years, you're going to be like, oh, but this now means that I have to spend all this time on this, when actually I could spend half the time doing something that I've been doing for years that I think's fine, when really, deep down, I think people know it's not fine, but we choose the easy life. So I think you have to give them that reason to buy into it, and they have to see that actually it's going to work, and that there's a reason behind it, and that it will, be better for workload, or it will be better for the children. Otherwise, if it doesn't have those things, why are you doing it? And I don't think you can jump the gun and assume that everything is fine because you've told the whole staff to do something. I'm sure we've all worked out at some point that just because you tell someone to do something doesn't mean they're going to do it. And you have to have those opportunities to check in and get a genuine gauge of how it is actually going. And you have to have that sort of open door, come and bother me, come and ask me questions. I will come and help you, whatever it might be. One thing that I think some schools get wrong is that they, if they look at their school improvement plan and they know that they've got X amount of objectives to tick off and different things and they're under pressure, they will start the next thing before the first thing is embedded, and then the first thing falls apart. And then teachers feel under more pressure, leaders feel under more pressure. You have to make it a habit. It has to be part of your day-to-day practice before you can then move on to the next thing. And I think part of that is introducing things bit by bit and, not overwhelming them with everything at once. And I think you have to accept that your results won't happen quickly. And when I say quickly, I don't mean, in a week. I mean, they won't happen in a year, probably. They probably won't happen in 2 years. I think you said this as well about at MathsConf about, to get a genuine picture of how it's going, you're probably going to go through 7 years because you need that whole cycle for it to have happened. And if you're introducing something in reception and then rolling it out, or even in Key Stage 1 and then rolling it out, you have to dedicate that time to it, and you have to say, it's working, but we're not going to see the genuine success of it until this year, whenever it is in the future. Which can be really hard, I think, for some people to accept. And I think some leaders are like, well, I might not be here in 5 years, so, I want to see results now. But it's not like a plaster over it job if you genuinely want to introduce something and have that school-wide impact. And I think sometimes that's the approach people take, because they go, oh, well, we'll just do this for now because it'll work for now. And then it'll be someone else's problem. But we can't do that. So I think that's my approach to school-wide change.
I think a solid approach. You're actually reminding me of a few of the sort of assistant head teachers I'm working with at the minute, because whenever I come in with a grand plan for the academic year, and some genius cognitive science that I've decided we must implement, the first thing they'll say is, well, what can we take out of the workload? What's been removed? And they're always, a large part of what they do is making sure their teams, because they have phases, is their team are on board. And I think the idea of having early adopters is so important, because it becomes a snowball, doesn't it? So I think that's
it does.
A piece of gold among many pieces of gold, maybe 147 in one section.
I try.
So I think the next one is a big one, because the maths edition of 100 Ideas for Primary Teachers is published in May. And I'll ask you the same question I asked Christopher Such, because I'm the Jeremy Paxman of Primary Education Podcasts. Why does the world need this book?
Well, it's a really hard question to answer, because I think many people just by nature are not particularly braggy. I think I'm probably the least braggy person in our kind of circle. I find it really hard to talk myself up. And so I'm going to try, because I have had to think about this, because I had to write an introduction to say, why you need to buy this book and what you'll get from it. So I think it's fair to say you and I know there are some interesting practices still going on in maths teaching, or mathematics teaching, because you love to say mathematics, and I always think it sounds so nice when you say it. I think there's definitely been progress, and we are moving in the right direction, but there is still some really interesting stuff going on. And I will use the word interesting, because I don't want anyone to come at me and tell me and say that I called their practice rubbish. But, I think I'm pretty vocal on Twitter at times. As you said earlier, I get involved in some debates. I started that ridiculous one about formal methods and written methods in year 2 a few months ago, and that was a fun one.
Nothing obvious about it. You're right.
No, and it was important, and I got involved with the crocodile one as well, which was another important debate. So I was asked about a year ago, and clearly Bloomsbury thought it was something that needed to be written, because they had it as a perspective title, and they came to me, which I never thought would happen, and it sounds ridiculous as I say it. But teachers are time poor. We don't have a lot of time to dedicate to reading. We don't have a lot of time to dedicate to professional development. I wish we did. I think if I ruled the world, I would give teachers an hour a week to just do reading or a webinar or whatever it is that they feel they need to develop, and it be self-led. But we're not in that situation, so I can't. But this for me is something that, early career teachers, NQTs, trainees, people that haven't been teaching maths for a long time, people who haven't been teaching maths in this sort of mastery way. This book, I hope it will be something they can pick up and take ideas from. It's literally called 100 Ideas. There are literally 100 ideas. And within there are little bonus ideas that I had to include. And they cover the national curriculum to I can't obviously write 100 ideas for the whole curriculum, but they cover all the different topics in the curriculum. There are ideas for year 1, there are ideas for year 6, there are ideas that you can change depending on what your year group is, and tweak it. The target audience for this book is not people like you. It's not people like probably a lot of teachers on Twitter, because they are already engaging in their own development, but it's for the people who are genuinely scared when it comes to teaching maths and don't have an idea and don't have a supportive network in school. and don't have a well-written curriculum. You know, I try not to delve into the edu Facebook groups too much, but when I do, like, I'm admin for a year 3-4 one, which is super random considering I teach year 2 now, but that's life. And the things that people say, like, you know, someone said, is anyone teaching year 4 fractions? Because I taught fractions of shapes yesterday. What should I teach next? I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What should you teach next? How do you not know? So there are genuinely people out there who don't have like a structured and well thought out curriculum given to them, which I think is a madness. And I think, you know, it's insane, and it's not those teachers' fault in the slightest. It's whoever their maths lead is. But those teachers can hopefully go, oh, I've got to teach something mathsy that I can't think of right now, like something to do with percentages. There's a couple of percentage ideas in there. What can I do? I'll open this book and I'll go to the fraction decimal percentages section, and I'll go to idea, I don't know, 45, I'm going to guess. But that's why people need it. It's the people who genuinely don't have the resources in school and don't have the knowledge already and don't have the experience of creating their own activities. So I think that's it. You know, it should highlight some of the important things in what I think are maths, important things in maths teaching. And I'm hoping that people get, if you did read it cover to cover, which no one feel the pressure to read it cover to cover, feel the pressure to buy it, because, you know, it's going to be a great, great book. But if you did read it cover to cover, I think you'd pick up on like the word structure several times, and you'd probably pick up on the word representation or manipulatives or something. Bar model, which I'm sure Elliot will not be pleased with. But, you know, those sort of things, they're like a running thread throughout the book. And I think hopefully people will read it and go, oh, that comes up a lot. That must be important. Let me look into that a bit more. So I think that's why the world needs it.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And so true. Because, you know, I think you hear 5% of teachers are on Twitter. So that still leaves quite a lot of people
crazy, isn't it?
Not engaging in that sort of conversation. You know, I'm not saying it's the be all end all, but like I'd never even considered Facebook as a viable option for somewhere to get advice on my practice.
I mean, you'd give wonderful advice on Facebook, but you would also tear your beard out.
I deleted my Facebook well over 6 years ago, and I've never gone back.
I'm tempted.
Sorry, Facebook. Sorry, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, don't worry, we've still got WhatsApp.
Yeah, which leads on really nicely to my next question. What are your 5 favorite ideas?
Right. I found this really, really hard, partly because I haven't gone to look at it since about November, because I sent it off at the end of August. And, you know, they sent me sort of an edited version. And so I had to look at it, and then they were like, we're going to go and lay it out now, and then we'll send it back to you when it's done. And I don't know what's happened. You know, I think they're very busy people. So I haven't like seen it laid out, and I've kind of gone, well, I'll wait until it's laid out and I'll see how, you know, the pictures look. And if the words look like there needs to be more words on the page, that kind of stupid thing. Because it has to go through 3 levels of like editing, and you know, I know what the process is. I'm just waiting to start the process at this point. And so I've kind of gone, I'm going to leave it, and then I'll look at it when they send the whole thing. So I had to go back and look at my first draft and look at what ideas I included and what I thought would be my 5 favorite. And I'm sure my 5 favorite would change, because that's the kind of person I am. I can't make decisions, and I can't stick to one thing, as you saw with my 4 features of Shannon lesson. My first one, though, is called Battle Frames. I had to come up with 100 zazzy titles. So as the ideas progress, you'll probably notice that the titles of the ideas get more and more boring, because I was like, how do I make this one interesting? How do I not just call it what it is? So it's called Battle Frames, and it's the idea of like the numberness of number being overlooked, not spending that time on what a number looks like, numbers to 10 particularly. So it's the case of having a tens frame and having some counters and setting out the rules that you like battleships, you have to guess where your partner's counters are effectively, and you have to guess what that number is. And so you have to kind of agree, I'm going to have it vertical and I'm going to fill it up from the left side down or up. You have that sort of agreement so that it's not really difficult, because these will be sort of year one children. And they have to compete against their partner to try and guess their chosen number. So, you might say something like, well, is it an even number? Have you filled every section? Have you filled every section on the left-hand side, or have you filled every section on the bottom row? Are there the same number of counters on the left-hand side as the right-hand side? Have you got two spaces? And it's all yes/no questions. And then eventually they'll work it out, because they have that kind of power of deduction, because they can visualize it in their head. So it's that idea of really being secure with what a number looks like, and knowing that if it were 6, it would look like 5 and 1. Or, if you then move it on, it might look like 2 3s. So that is one of my ideas. And it's something that I think that you can spend time for children to play with their parents quite easily. And that is a little suggestion at the bottom of the idea. I've got it on my screen so I can have a look at it. But it is like, it's one of those things you could send a tens frame home and say, fill it with like pasta and play this game, and send the instructions home. And it is a game, and yet they are learning. So that's the first of my 5.
That is genius. I know exactly what I'm going to do on Saturday with my youngest. Because we're definitely going to play battle frames.
I love it as an idea, and I played it with my year 2s because they missed a lot of school last year. They're not all secure. They weren't all secure. I hope they are secure now on numbers to 10. But it's a nice game. You don't have to sit there in a high stress environment. You're just at ease with whoever's sat next to you. And it's a nice one. I think that you could probably scale up in different ways as well, if I really thought about it. So number 2 is called Spotting Structures. And I wish I could show you what I'm going to describe, because then it will make sense. And I worry that I can't describe this well enough. So you will have to bear with me. So the idea behind it is that there is a tendency to rush in to using numbers when you are going to teach some sort of calculation. And in my mind, this is sort of around year 2, probably, start of year 3, to make sure that they are secure. And so if you imagine you are working with Deans or base 10, and you have what looks like, and you would not use the numbers with the children, but I have to use the numbers with you so you can visualize what I want you to visualize. So you've got 23 add 15 equals 20 add, and then a space in Deans. And then the whole point of this is that you can then very easily see that, you've got 2 10s on both sides, and then what is left will be what goes in that gap. And I think it's that whole, how often do they get those questions wrong in, say, an arithmetic test, where they just can't balance it? They'll add up that side, and then they'll try and take that from that, and there will be some sort of error because they don't genuinely understand what they're doing. And so for me, it's, you are working with the structure first before you start adding in numbers. Obviously, they know what these Deans mean. They know it's 23, but I'm like, we don't need to call it 23 right now. We're just looking at it. We're just spotting what is the same. And then we can work out what is different and what will go on the other side. And, it could work for more than just the 2-digit numbers that I've mentioned. But that for me is a really important one. Like I said, structure comes up quite a few times. And I think we don't do enough of that kind of, we jump quite quickly into, here are some numbers. We're going to add these numbers mentally. We need to just pare it back and go, do you actually understand what makes this problem a problem? Do you know what the maths is here? Because I guarantee you most of them don't.
Yeah, I think children find that particularly tricky.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sold on this already. I can't wait until May.
You'll just find these 5 really good ideas, and then the other 95 will be rubbish. But it's fine because there's 5 bits of gold. Yes, that was really important to me, I think. And both of those were sort of like early when I was, because they approached me, but I had to write a proposal so that they knew that I could actually do this. And so that I knew that I could actually do this. And one of the things was like, list as many ideas as you think you might include in the book. And I think I listed something like 50. I was just like they were just coming out of my brain. And most of them aren't in the book now, but they were obviously good enough to sell it. But those 2 were on my original list because I just thought they're just such important concepts that we don't spend enough time on. And then we wonder why children in year 6 can't do it. Even that question of like 23 add 15 equals 20 add something, like there will be children who don't get that in year 6. And it's a crime. Like we're doing a huge disservice to our children if we're not teaching them that. Anyway.
What I really like is that, because I've imagined what it might be like to try and come up with 100 different ideas. Each one so far has had a rationale behind it. That's quite a powerful idea. And I didn't expect that. That's really powerful. I guess here's the reason why you need this activity.
Yes, I tried really hard to make sure there was just like a reason. Some of them, like towards the end of writing it, I remember I sat in my armchair, I'm looking at it right now, and I remember just being like, I've got 23 left. And you were texting me saying, how many have you done? And everyone was texting me saying, how's it going? And I'm like, it's fine. And I lied to so many people and said, yeah, I'm nearly done. Because I was just like, I can't tell them that I have 23 left. So, yeah, I probably lied to you at some point. So I apologised about that. But I did really try and come up with, there is a problem that we need to fix, and this might go some way to fix it. So the number 3 is called What It Is and What It Isn't. And it's the idea of using like standard, non-standard, non-examples. And I don't think that enough people necessarily know about it. And I think people are probably a little scared because they know it's, towards, variation theory. And I think that terrifies people. And I think it terrifies us a little bit as well, because it's not set in stone and people think different things about it. And you can hear one thing from a maths hub and one thing from someone quite academic, and you think, what do I do? And so I thought I'd include a little bit, so that, because I think this is something people can go in and go, well, this will work for lots of different things. I'm going to try and use it. And that's something I've said to my teachers is, this is something that before we get into all of the genuine, like meaty theory about variation, this is something you can understand. This is something you can go, oh, I understand why that's a non-standard example, and I understand why that's a non-example, and I understand why it might be important to show them. And so this one is all about halves. And, it's very simple. I have a picture with different shapes that are split into 2 parts, and you have to look at what is a half and what isn't a half. And there are some genuine, just standard examples, like a circle with a vertical line. And there are some like a square that is on its side with a diagonal line. And then there are some that are, not in half, but many children will think they are in half because they haven't grasped that whole equal part thing yet. And I think that's a really nice entry kind of level way of looking at non-standard, non-examples, because they're not looked at deeply enough, I think. I make these generalizations. I haven't been in every primary school. I don't know. But this is the feel I get from talking to people.
Well, the thing is, the idea behind these interviews is sort of to get teachers' impressions of the world in which we're working, and on carrying out our work. So, you speak to your truth, and that's all we can do. There's no way we're going to be able to solve absolutely everything. And I think it's really interesting that you talk about sort of the debate about variation and stuff. And I think what you're doing by giving those examples is, in my opinion, what needs to happen next, where the profession needs to take the advice and then show what that might look like. What does it look like in our classroom?
Yeah.
And then collect a bank of ideas that work, because we could argue until we're blue in the face, and we may still be arguing in 20, 30 years time. That's not going to help us in class, tomorrow morning.
No.
So yeah.
And I think you're right that we could actually still be arguing about this in 20, 30 years time. It's not like it's a brand new thing and that they've just come up with it, and so it's not set in stone yet because it's brand new. It's not brand new. It's been talked about for a long time, and yet we still haven't really decided what it is, which is why, it does need to be handled with care, and you can't just go in gung-ho and be like, we're doing variation and this is what it is and that's it. But you can drip feed in these little bits, because these are bits that we do understand. And, we've talked before about how we still don't understand it to its entirety because we can't yet. But this kind of like you said, doing this sort of thing, having this bank of examples would be beneficial.
Yeah, because they can take your idea and then turn it into a slightly different idea, and then over time,
exactly,
tons of ideas that work in the same way. Excellent. This is a strong start with these first three.
Okay, so number 4 is something that I think lots of students struggle with, and I'm going to say teachers struggle with it as well. And I feel like it's probably a bold call to make, but I think you'll probably agree with me. And it's that whole idea of like a pre-sale price. And that there has been a percentage taken off and you need to work out the original price. And I think it flummoxes so many people. And actually, it doesn't need to, because if you know what that should look like in your head and you understand the structure of it, then you can answer that really quickly. And so I've approached it from a bar model point of view. And the case of, here's your original price, here's the percentage it would have been, and then you can work it out. You just need to see what it looks like. And I'm sure there will be people who are anti-bar model who will disagree with me and who will say, just teach it. But actually, this problem particularly, you really need to see it. Even if you just see it a couple of times and you suddenly go, oh, that's what it looks like. That's how you can picture it in your head when you're faced with this problem. But I do genuinely believe to be successful and have a real kind of deep understanding of this style of problem that does just flummox people, you have to see it. And I think a bar model works well for it. And I'm sure you can work out what my bar models look like because you're an intelligent person. And if anyone is listening, I'm sure there'll be lots of listeners. If anyone's listening and going, I don't know what that looks like, just ask me and I will draw it out for you, because it's valuable and you don't need to wait until May to buy the book. I'll just draw it for you now.
I was thinking it might be great for you to do a video on these 5 and then we could share that in the run-up.
You put me on the spot now. You never know. I'm hard to pin down, so I'm just so busy and important.
This is taking 6 months?
I said to someone this morning, I've got this podcast recording tonight, and I've been putting it off for a while. And they're like, how long? And I was like, well, I think some of them were recorded a couple of months before Christmas. And I just keep avoiding the topic because I just get so nervous and full of imposter syndrome. But it's fine, we're here. Right, so we've had 4 pretty good ideas. It has been 4, hasn't it? I haven't suddenly got to pull out. No, it's 4.
No,
it's been 4.
4, yeah.
I'm on number 5. Number 5 is called Seeing Doubles. And it is the idea that we need to expose children to the connections that are in maths. And so linking things between concepts, making something just genuinely explicitly clear to them is really important. So I'm coming at it from the perimeter of a rectangle angle, where they need to know that the two parallel sides are the same length. And they need to understand that if they see 7 and 2 as the measurements of your rectangle, they just need to double it. But I rarely see this taught, and I don't know why, because it just makes sense. So for me, I would do some sort of, starter to get them thinking about doubles, because not enough children can double mentally, even like 1-digit numbers. We do maths passports at our school, and we introduced them before I was maths lead. And hilariously, I got the old maths lead a pilot's hat to wear when he was testing people. And I didn't think, I went into this job knowing I was going to take over maths, and I didn't at any point think I'm going to have to wear this hat. So now I have to wear the hat. But one of the objectives, I can't remember what passport it's on, is doubles. And it's like the number of children who get stuck on it for at least a month when they've nailed all their other targets in that one passport, and they just can't do the doubles. And you think, surely you've been doing this since Key Stage 1, you're in Year 5, why can you not do double 15? It's very easy. That's a horrible thing to say, but I've said it now. But you go, why do you not know how to do this? Because actually when you do learn it and you've taught them really explicitly and you've gone over them again and again and again, and you have that aspect of retrieval and you revisit them constantly, then they should know them. You should say double 7 and they should say 14, but not enough do. So this idea is make sure they're confident with their doubles, or as confident as you're going to get them. We'll rarely get an entire class who are genuinely confident in what you're doing, and that is a shame. But it's the way it is. And I think if we waited until the whole class was secure in everything, we'd be waiting a long time. And you think you just have to accept at some point you need to move on. But then you do all the work and you do all the intervention and you make it fine, and it's all fine. So this is, you make sure that they're good with their doubles. It might be that you revisit it for a lesson. It might be you revisit it for 15 minutes, depends on your class. And then you are looking at the perimeter of a rectangle. You see, show them examples of 7, 7, 2, 2, and show them that, the sides are the same, and then start to take them away and be like, well, what do we know? So what can we do? So let's do that. And I think it's just one of those things that not enough children make the connection because not enough teachers have made the connection that actually this is a really easy way of getting your perimeter. And, I think many children fluff a question like this because they're too busy trying to add 4 numbers together. And those numbers, they might be decimals or they might be bigger numbers. And so making that kind of calculation slip is a lot easier. And so giving them this kind of strategy and making them aware of this kind of connection is a very helpful thing to do. So that is my 5th idea, seeing doubles.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, because in my experience, 2A plus B doesn't get as much of a run out as it deserves. You'll often see A plus B plus A plus B.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I consider myself a bit of a purist. I much prefer, the 2 with the brackets and then the, over 2 when we're talking about dividing by 2. That's my modus operandi. No,
but I'm totally with you. They need to see it. And I think putting it into that kind of language and showing them that, introducing that tiny element of algebra, there's nothing wrong with it. It's going to make them stronger when they come to it properly later on. So I think that kind of element of this is how you can do it is very helpful.
I'm genuinely really excited now for this book because
Oh.
five really strong activities, some of which I'm going to use with my own kids this weekend. A rationale for them, I think this is going to be really powerful and really useful for teachers. And if you could do a video, then I'm sure they'd all really love to see that. Explaining.
I'll talk to my people.
Modeling, and then we could share that on the YouTube, and it'll probably be the most popular video.
It will not. Your videos are so good. They are so good.
And so, which part of May can we expect to be able to buy that in shops?
I want to say the 13th. I think it was originally the 6th, and I think people started to order it, and then it got pushed to the 13th. So hopefully May 13th.
Nice.
If all goes to plan.
Fingers crossed we'll be open and able to have a launch, which would be fantastic.
I know. I did think last year in lockdown, like, thank goodness this is probably going to come out next year, because otherwise I won't have a launch party. And now I'm like, oh, it's 4 months away. I'm probably not going to have a proper launch party, which is obviously all I care about.
Well, I think I think you deserve to celebrate the hard work you put into it. But I think you've also got the summer window. I'm still having a launch party, even if no one else comes, and it's just me.
Absolutely.
That was in September.
Yeah, well, we need to do
it. So changing the topic just a little bit, Saturday conferences are clearly a passion of yours. Why do you enjoy them so much?
I'm just a bit geeky about our job. I just think it's wonderful, and I love making myself better at it. And, Saturday CPD is cheap and accessible, and it's friendly. And sometimes it's in the pub, which is wonderful. The first one I went to was Primary Rocks 3 or 4 years ago, I can't remember. And I was new to Twitter and new to using Twitter. And but I was taking part in the Primary Rocks chat on a Monday, because I think lots of people kind of spot it and go, oh, this is primary based, I'm going to delve in. And they start talking about Primary Rocks Live. And I was like, what is this thing? This sounds great. And then they were like, the tickets are going on sale at 9:00. And I remember being sat in the bath and going, well, I'm going to order a ticket to this thing that I don't know what it is, but everyone seems to say it's great. And so I ordered 2 tickets because I was like, I'm not going alone. I'll find someone to go with me. And luckily I did. And it sold out in like 2 minutes. And I was like, am I going to see Beyonce? Like, what is this thing? And it was, the tickets just went. And it was in March, and it was around St. Patrick's Day. And it was just like the best day. And I remember kind of coming away from it being really excited, and sort of like my primary teaching passion was like reawakened. And as much as I've never lost it, it was like, oh, it's like invigorated it. And I suddenly have these ideas, and I've seen these people talk. And I remember I saw Stephen Lockyer, who I love. And I don't remember who else I saw, which is really bad. Oh, I saw Rob from the Literacy Shed. And I saw someone else. Oh, I went to a computing one. That's what I did. It was like unplugged computing. So I went to things that I was like, I know nothing about this. There were maths ones, but I remember being like, I'll go to things that I am not good at, which is why I went to computing. And we built Lego, and it was wonderful. And I remember sitting in this room and being like, these are people I've interacted with on Twitter, who I have sort of, come to see as like Twitter friends, which seemed super sad at the time, but now it's just my life. And then we all went out after and got completely drunk. And I had not been that drunk for a while, since I was like 18, and it was mad. And I think I got into bed at like 5 a.m. and I drove home at like 12 from Manchester. But it was just the best weekend. And I got back and I was like, this is incredible. There are more of these things. And so I started to look out for things. And Brewed Flip in Oxford was happening, and it was organised by Ed Finch, and I had kind of seen Breweds. They were very new at this point, and I'd seen them and thought, these look great because you're in a pub, and every picture of them, people like holding up a pint at like 11 a.m. And I was like, what is this? And so Kate Obridge persuaded me to get a ticket because I was having a bit of a rubbish time. And it was my birthday weekend, and she had been, we'd made Twitter friends. And so we met at the train station, we met at Marylebone and got to Oxford, ordered a cider at 10:30 in the morning, which is ridiculous, like a strawberry and lime cider, which is not a breakfast drink. And that was my introduction to Breweds. And, I think when lockdown hit, I think I'd gone to about 20 of them. And, I've organised 3. And I spoke at one last February, which was terrifying but wonderful. And it's just the best time. And I know there's that argument on Twitter constantly of people shouldn't do CPD on the weekends. It's their free time. But I'm like, it's my free time. I can do with it what I want. I have no children, no husband, no one's depending on me. If I want to spend a tenner on a ticket for an all-day event where I can sit in a pub or a school hall with my friends or even a bunch of strangers and talk teaching and learning and develop myself professionally, then I see nothing wrong with that. And I wouldn't have had all of the professional development I've had in the last few years if I hadn't have been going to these things. Most schools don't have the budget for regular CPD. Most weekday CPD is like hundreds because that's people's jobs. And I understand they need to charge for it. But the same speakers then speak at the weekend for free. So why would you not go to that one? And I just love it. And I've made so many friends from it. I've made, from Twitter, but mainly from going to conferences and meeting people. And it's like I found my people, like my tribe, which sounds super cringy, but it's how it feels. And particularly in the last year, I've developed this friendship group of now like best friends who came from organising Brewed Maths. And it's just, I just think it's the best thing in the world. I don't know if that's coming across, but I love it. And I can't wait to get back to it because I can't stand, like I can do like an online webinar for like an hour or two. I can't do a whole day online. And I know that last lockdown they were happening, but I just can't do it. It's not me. And so I haven't done them. And I just need to get back and sit in a pub function room with some friends because then I'll feel like me again. So yeah, that's me and Saturday CPD.
Yeah, I know, and I think you're hitting all the key points. Because you're right, really high quality, really affordable. And I personally was quite intimidated. Before I went to Red, before I went to Brewed, the one in the Weald, just because new people, it's just not nice. But when you get there, everyone's absolutely lovely and fantastic. And like you say, finding your people, because everybody's interested in CPD, and they're giving it their time. It's wonderful. It's 100%.
It is brilliant. And like I think everyone feels a bit intimidated at first. And whether you're going to a Brewed and it's 30 people in a pub, or you're going to like a research ed and it's the most people in the room I've ever seen, they're equally scary. But you do just get there and you go, oh, I feel at home because I'm surrounded by people who believe what I believe. It's lovely.
And so what advice would you give anyone looking to get involved?
I would just say, just do it, like bite the bullet and just do it. You kind of have to just go, I'm going to book a ticket to something, preferably something local to start with so that if you really hate it, you can run away. But I think it probably won't happen like that. Just jump on the train. You will make friends there. I can't think of an event, particularly a Brewed, where it is more intimate, where anyone has been left on their own for the whole day. You might, watch the first person and just sit in the corner, but then eventually you start talking because there are breaks and people talk to each other, and we're a really nice bunch. And I just think if you're seeing events be tweeted about and you don't know what it is, ask someone. I am happy to have strangers DM me, and I know that's going to get me in some hot water. But I have message requests set up for a reason. But if someone DMs me and says, I've had it before where people have been like, you're tweeting about a brew ed. What is a brew ed? And then I've explained to them what it is and said, it's the best thing. Please book a ticket to one, because they are the loveliest days. And I think if you're tempted and you think, oh, but I don't know, just reply to someone who's tweeting about it and say, what is it? How can I get a ticket? Or message someone. I tweet about them when they're happening. That's pretty much all I tweet about. That's why I've got 30,000 tweets, because I sit on a Saturday and just tweet whoever is talking, and I just like a live feed of it. And so you just have to jump in. And I think, eventually you get to be part of the crowd, and, you meet up with people and you agree to go to the same events, and then you start organising them and you start speaking at them. And it's the best time. It's a real hoot. Nice.
As you're saying that, I'm actually thinking, has there been a brew ed in Ireland? Because it surprises me that there hasn't. Maybe I
can't think of one.
Happened. Consider how much of a central role the local public house plays in the community in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
I would expect it to be quite a popular idea. So maybe watch this space.
Absolutely.
And speaking of brew ed, January 11th, 2020, the extremely popular brew ed maths took place. Will there be an edition in 2021?
I really hope so. We had such a good day, and we have made the best friends from it. And if there is a time that we are all allowed in the function room of a pub this year, then we are doing it. We talked about doing it online and then replicating it in person. And I think, if it looks like pub gatherings aren't going to happen, then an online one is definitely an option. And I think we will, we'll end up doing that if we can't make it happen in person. But I would love us to organise a second one, because we had such a successful day last year, and I didn't know what it was going to be like, because there weren't any subject-specific brew eds. There'd been like an early years one, and there'd been an SEN one, I think, but there hadn't been a subject. And so I remember sitting there at a maths conference for the Thames Maths Hub and going, this would be better in a pub with some alcohol. And so I tweeted then, does anyone have any interest in this? And then Elliot texted me saying, yeah, I think this would be great. And other people started to say, yeah, I'd talk if you wanted me to talk. And then slowly we developed it. And I just think, why would we not do another? And even if we have to do it outside, like a little brew ed maths festival with bring your own alcohol or non-alcoholic drinks for those who don't want to partake, I think we need to make it happen. And we've already talked about names. We talked about names last year. This time last year, we're going, who can we get to talk next time? And it's been a year and we've just been locked down for most of that time. But if we can make it happen, it will happen, because it's wonderful.
There's definitely an appetite, because you're talking about things sound out quick. The tickets for bread maths the first time, they went very quickly, didn't they?
They went very quickly. And I think if we did it again, there'd be more people who were like, oh, it looked so good last year.
Yeah.
I'll go again, I would hope. The one thing I worry about is that people will be scared about getting together. And I think part of me is like, I want to be the first one to do it. I want, as soon as it's safe, I want to be the first one that organises one. But then I'm like, will people come to it? Because there are going to be people who are feeling anxious about getting in a room with 30 strangers. We'd need to pick a really big room.
More than 59 or 60 people this time.
that room was not fit for... So we will do it. I'm confident that something will happen with the hashtag #BrewEdMaths.
Excellent. Fingers crossed. And I think last time I suggested my 5 favourite types of bar, and rooftop bar was my selection. So maybe rooftop bars are both outside and spacious. That may be something.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Have a little cocktail. Sounds brilliant.
Excellent. So one thing every guest gets asked is for their research thunderbolt. The moment when the scales fell from their eyes and the world was brand new. What is your research thunderbolt?
So I said earlier on that my first sort of insight into research was the marked improvement review, but that as much as like I read it and was like, yeah, that, you know, that wasn't my kind of thunderbolt moment. I think the real moment was when I read Why Minimal Guidance During Instruction Does Not Work by like Kirshner's fellow Clark, you know the one. And I just think it's so important to get over that idea that they need to discover something to learn it. And it's something I'm sure Morgs will back me up here, but our PGCE was heavy on the discovery learning. And when I went into teaching and I started teaching, it was very much like, this is the best kind of lesson. This inquiry-based lesson is how you do things. And I've always been a bit skeptical about it, but I've always had people who are more experienced than me and more knowledgeable, I would imagine, going, what you need to do is you give them a maths problem and you let them do it, and you don't have any input at all, and you just let them explore it and discover it for themselves. And I remember those are like the least successful lessons I've ever taught, because I haven't taught. And I hate the fact that I put children through that for an hour when I could have actually taught them something that might help them. And I mean, don't even get me started on the level of problem solving I was expecting from them, because it certainly wasn't the kind of like 2 years previous that we would do now. So that kind of lesson was very popular. Or the kind of lesson where it's like a humanities thing and you've got, 4 different texts or 4 different sources, and the children are sat around a table and they have to read their own thing, and then they just have to teach it to each other. And that's your lesson. And I can't see why it's ever been popular and why it's still popular now in some circles. So like, I genuinely, it's not for me. And so I remember someone sending this to me, I think after a conversation on Twitter quite early on, and me being like, oh my word, finally, this is what I need. This is the actual evidence and research that I can throw in someone's face if they say to me, why don't you try inquiry-based learning? Because it's very hard when you are, being observed and someone more senior than you is saying you should do this, and you're sat there going, I don't think I should. But I'm an NQT and I can't argue this with you. But being armed with this kind of paper is just a game changer. And, it's something that I can be like, well, have you read this? Because actually, I would disagree. And so this one, I think for me, is just like light bulbs everywhere, fireworks, and just stop expecting them to learn on their own, because it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, it's I think it's an important paper. I think there's a nice bit of cyclical motion going on, because this is the first Thunderbolt of this season. It's also the last Thunderbolt. And Lloyd and I were talking about how well written it is, So I think if you're looking to give someone an accessible piece of paper, that's going to say there are other ways, because I think in some situations with really, really expert teachers, it is possible to construct situations where people will, but it's not for novices. It's not for teachers who are just learning, because there's so much skill that goes into crafting those scenarios that I remember trying them, and just like yourself, remember them being absolutely woeful, and then learning very quickly that actually things are going to go a lot more smoothly if I start giving a bit of instruction as well as those experiences.
As well as this. No, totally. And I think there's been an argument on Twitter several times about like there is a time and place for it, and there's a time and place for most things, but for me, with the kind of the kind of children I teach who have these massive gaps, particularly now, like children coming back from doing no work last lockdown was mad. And that it's just not something I can fit in at the moment. And it's not something I fit in very often anyway, but it's certainly not, it's not one of those things in my toolkit where I'm like, oh, I'll do this today. I would need to know that, you know, they know all they need to know, and that this is like an added bonus, which is an unlikely scenario.
I think that's the key. It's about opportunity cost and how much time we've got. You know, I think there's quite a bit of construction in variation, in terms of making sense of, you know, the things, the patterns we notice and stuff, you know, but whole hog, as you say, you know, the time just isn't there, especially when we work in areas of high socioeconomic deprivation where the kids typically will need some sort of serious intervention to sort of be successful in maths. Yeah, so I'm with you 100%. And then the second paper is one that every primary teacher should read.
So I'm not going to like drone on for as long as I just droned on then, because I feel like I've done a lot of talking, which I know is the whole point of this. But the one that I think every primary teacher should read, and every teacher should read, is the learning versus performance, and really digging into what those two things are and why they are separate, and knowing that that I have a very rough quote that I will really botch now, so I apologize, but it's like the performance today doesn't translate into like learning that's evident tomorrow, something along those lines. And I just feel like I say we because I'm very giving, and I say we as a profession, but it's one of those things we need to take it into account when we're teaching. We need to understand that someone putting their hand up and mimicking what you've done isn't a sign that they've learned something. Sometimes it is, and often, I think if you know your class well enough, as we generally do as primary teachers, you can see when it's someone who you expect to learn it and you expect to pick it up that quickly, and it's not that they're just mimicking you, and they genuinely have taken it and processed it, and then they can do it. But there are some cases where you go, oh, didn't expect you to come out with that answer, and you go, wonderful, well done, Fred, you've nailed it early on, and I didn't expect you to. But it's not, and we need to recognize that it's not learning, it's performance, and they have taken what you've done and they've been able to like tweak it a little, which is impressive, but it's not necessarily learning. That's my one that I think everyone should read. Superb.
And I think I was more years than I care to remember into my career before, because everything was geared towards performance, you know, the school's inspection system, the 100%. National curriculum, and getting from level 1 or P levels to 5 as quick as you possibly could. And it was geared towards performance. And then over time, we've had that freedom to actually say, hold on a second. And then it matches up perfectly with everything else that we sort of, you know, everything you talked about earlier on in terms of what's actually happening in the lesson here. Yeah, it's a great choice. And one, it could be a threshold that teachers need to go through. And so a perfect paper for them all to read.
Yeah, I think you're right. That is one of those things you do have to, I don't think you can just be told it. You know, this would, you know, it'd be a great one for people who are training to read, but I think they actually need to see it for themselves in their own class and be able to recognize it. But I do think, you know, once you are teaching and once you've taught for a little while, you should read it, and then you'll start to see it. And like you say, it's been the nature of our system for a while. And I think in so many schools, it still is the nature, you know, even in schools that I have worked in the last few years, when I've been observed and like a child has done something right, and then whoever's observing is going, why didn't you then move them on so that they could work by themselves? Because they've clearly got it. And you go, how do I know that they've clearly got it? Because they were able to copy what I did once. And there is that pressure of going, well, why are you not moving them on? Why are you not challenging them? Why are you not giving them the opportunity to show that they can do it? I'm like, well, let's just slow down and actually work out if they've learned it. before we go wild, because otherwise we're wasting our time when we could be teaching them and they could actually be learning. And we're doing them a disservice. But there is still that kind of old school view in some leadership teams where they see something and they go, well, you should have done that because clearly they were fine, when they don't even know your children.
Yeah. We should get the big Ebbinghaus graph and just point to where we are now and say, I'll see you in 30 days.
Yeah. Maybe we should make that for teachers everywhere. We can sell it.
Drawstring, like they used to have maps of the world.
Oh yeah.
Just Ebbing, the forgetting curve, and just well, okay.
I'm totally with you there.
Awesome. So the last thing we've got to do is the tier list. And so you have, and I'll just share my screen before continuing. Okay, so as you will be familiar, S tier is, as you said earlier on, God tier. A is very, very good. B is about average, and C is below par. And you're going to rank 6 of our finest national curriculum requirements from the primary national curriculum.
Okay.
And it's just your opinion, and you haven't seen these in advance.
I know, but people will judge my opinion because I have judged other people's opinions.
There are no wrong answers. So some of them will have to recrop because they were quite long and didn't fit into the...
Yeah, I can imagine.
Exactly. So the first one is a doozy. It's adding and subtracting numbers using concrete objects, pictorial representations, and mentally from year 2.
S. You know how I feel about this. It's so important. We cannot skip this step. And yet, there are some schemes of work and some schools and some teachers who feel that you can skip this step and you can go straight to a written column method, which I think is ridiculous. This one objective will get you so far. If you have children in year 2 who can't do this, spend more time on it. This is one of those things that we spent so much time on this before Christmas because obviously they were behind after lockdown. So we had to kind of cover bits of year 1 content, and then we're doing, what we should be doing year 2. And this is one of those ones that I was like, I will not skip through this. It needs to be done thoroughly. And everyone else in my school was like, I'm starting multiplication and division. And I was like, well, I'm not. And I'm the maths lead, so it's fine, because they need this so much. And if your year 2s go up to year 3 next year and they can't do this, you are genuinely screwing over the year 3 teacher. And that sounds really harsh, but I think you are. Because they then have to teach it. And if they don't teach it, those children can't calculate mentally. And how unfair is that? I can add, 2 two-digit numbers in my head. They should be able to do it as well. We need to give them that opportunity. I feel very strongly about this one. I hope the rest of this is easy.
And so you should. I'm 100% with you. So the next one, if I uncrop it, is dividing proper fractions by whole numbers.
It's so interesting.
For example, 1/3 divided by 2.
Right. Oh, okay. I think I'm going to be quite bold and put it in the B category. I think it's one of those things that can wait. It can wait, as far as I'm concerned. We have bigger fish to fry, and I'd much rather they had a really solid understanding of fractions rather than what happens quite often is jumping to division, memorizing some ridiculous rhyme or KFC. And if I see that in classrooms, I scream, and not understanding what the actual processes behind it and what the structure is behind it, and we don't draw it out and we don't do all the things we should do with it. And I think if we're not going to teach it properly, which most people don't, we shouldn't do it and we should leave it. And then I think secondary teachers would probably thank us for not mucking it up.
Yeah, there's definitely a school of thought, which is why it's in here, that a lot of the fractions we see in primary should really be left until secondary. I'm not sure 100% where I fall on it.
No,
but I
love fractions.
Yeah, I think it's some of the most interesting stuff. And like you say, very easily learn to multiply two proper fractions. But do they really understand? And you need to go underneath. That's really enjoyable, I think. But is it?
Yes, I think it's lovely and so interesting. So
I think
do we have time for it?
It's lucky to be in B.
Yeah.
So the next one, if we
I love this process.
Is enumerate the possibilities of combinations of two variables.
You've picked some interesting ones there, Max. I think I'm going to put it in A because I don't think it's as important as a foundation as mentally adding and subtracting. But I do think it's important, and I do think that actually it's interesting, and it's one of those things that can be a real joy to teach if you're doing it what I would say as properly. But I'll probably get in trouble because I say things like, well, if you just taught it properly, and then people get a bit upset. But it's one of those things that I do think that there is a joy to it, and I think that it can be a really fun one to do. But I would say that probably about all maths, because I don't know if there's any part of it that I go, oh, don't want to teach that. It might be 4, 5 or 6.
The reason I chose it was because it's part of a list in year 6 that scared the Metal Gear Solid sound out of teachers, because they look at the board and they think, oh my goodness.
I know.
And I know there is some guidance, but I think it could be, like you say, going for that subject knowledge is important, because then it becomes less scary,
Yeah, and I think it's an area of the curriculum that is often neglected because, like you said, it's a year 6 kind of list of scary things that teachers, only a small percentage of teachers have to teach it. And if we're honest, many teachers historically have probably skipped over it in favour of what's more likely to come up in the SATs and what will come up throughout the SATs, And I have certainly had conversations with people who have been like, well, I'm not going to bother with this.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's 2 marks every year, essentially.
That's the thing. But I'm a bit like, well, is that why we teach children? It's not why we teach children.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
But it's, go on.
No, I think, quite a lot of people don't get that far because they're trying to rush through as much as possible. But
exactly.
During the first lockdown, I was teaching my oldest, and we were looking at, as you said earlier on, about balancing equations, essentially, which is algebra. Andrew Jeffrey has that fantastic activity he does, where he's got the envelopes. And so really, you could be introduced into year 1, year 2, the idea of algebra. And if it's something that happens the way through the school, then it's not scary when you get to it. And I think that's still
completely agree.
I'll put it in the show notes, the link to that talk.
Yes, do.
If I can find it, but it's fantastic. And if he's ever doing it again, which I think he might be at MathsConf 25 in March, then do check it out, because it's superb. So number 4, using fronted adverbials. I forgot about that.
Oh, that's hilarious. So topical. Right.
Sorry.
I was a year 4 teacher for a couple of years, and I had to teach fronted adverbials. And I kind of commented slightly on this debate on Twitter the other day when the author, who I will obviously not name, wrote the letter to the head teacher saying, why is my children doing this grammar work? It takes the creativity out of English teaching. And I kind of chimed in to be like, well, we use this sort of technical language in math, we use this technical language in science and geography, so why not give these things a name in English? And so I'm going to get slated for whatever I say. So I think, right, I'm going to put it in B, because I don't, it's not the most important thing, but it's also not a bad thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with actually explicitly teaching the grammar. And I don't think there's anything wrong with using the words fronted adverbials with the children.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm a big fan of grammar. Because
me too.
Even though because I like learning languages. And even though I taught the subjunctive in whatever year it was in Key Stage 2, it was only when I really tried to understand the subjunctive in Spanish did I realize how deep that idea goes. And so obviously, you're a big fan of Spanish too, and one of your many hidden talents. And I was like, I haven't even scratched the surface of this idea.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if it were me making this decision, I'd go even further. Yeah,
I mean, when I did, so my school offered French was like you had to do French, and Spanish was a club, and so I did Spanish club obviously, and I did a Latin GCSE in year 9 because I'm a loser, and I just like language, and so like learning the subjunctive in French, and I mean we touched on it in Spanish club, but there's only so much you could do with an hour a week, and then having to look at it from an English curriculum point of view, I was like, I know what this is because I can do it in French. And I don't know why people have such a problem with it. It's part of our language. And like you said, you like grammar. I quite like grammar. I like these sort of like technical aspects. And much like our children are not going to learn to problem solve on their own, without the knowledge, without being fluent in the area they're problem solving in, our children are not going to write technically accurately, that doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean, without being fluent in the grammar as well.
Yeah, it's the difference between being sort of literate and having a command of the language, and I think the more children who have a command of English, the better, for them and for society in general, I think.
Agreed.
So I think the next one might be less controversial. And it's probably in here because of how interesting it looked. So it's comparing and grouping together different kinds of rocks on the basis of their appearance and simple physical properties. Okay.
I'm a big rocks and soils nerd. I think because it was my first science unit of work when I was in NQT. And when you're in NQT, you swat up on things. I certainly did. And you do like these really extravagant displays. And I had the most extravagant rocks and soils display, which I don't know if I'm proud of it now or not. But at the time, I definitely was. And I loved teaching rocks and soils. And I love rocks. And it sounds so sad now I'm saying it out loud. But I'm going to put this in A because it's one of those things that doesn't come up throughout the curriculum. It's not like if you think about like animals, including humans, or plants, these things crop up, no pun intended there with crop up. They crop up a few times. Whereas this one, you learn rocks in year 3. And I like it a lot. I think they're so interesting. And I remember learning about the different types of rocks when I was in school. And I think, why shouldn't we be comparing and grouping different kinds of rocks on the basis of their appearance and simple physical properties? Bam.
And you've inadvertently got in the A tier algebra rocks. That's pretty awesome.
Algebra does rock. It's so good.
And then last but not least, we have describing the sun, earth, and moon as approximately spherical bodies.
I mean, I think it's very important. I can't work out if it's as important as calculating mentally. But I don't know if that's because ultimately maths is my one true love. And that, you know, that S tier is, I kind of feel like only one thing should make it in there because that's how exclusive it is. So I'm going to describe the sun, earth, and moon as approximately spherical bodies in A, because I love space. And on my first teaching practice, when I was, you know, the NQT, not in NQT, when I was a trainee taking the class, we did space. And it's just such an enjoyable unit to teach. There is so much good in it. And one of my children in my class at the moment also loves space. And every day he comes in, and I promise you it's every day, he goes, "Can we learn about space now?" And I'm like, "Not on our curriculum, I'm afraid, mate, but you know." So for his remote learning, I've given him loads of space work. So it's just extra stuff on space. But it is so interesting. And also, spherical bodies, sphere, we need to get the maths in. They need to make those connections. What's wrong? You know, nothing can be wrong with that.
Excellent. Some fine choices. And remember, there are no wrong answers. I
know, but all I can think is that somebody, probably one of our friends, is going to like listen to this and then be like, "Oh, why did you do that? You're wrong. Do you really think that?"
Yeah. If Neil Almond makes it this far through.
Yeah. This will be it. Neil Almond will listen and he'll go, "But Shan, do you really think this?" But I really think that the S that's the best one.
Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure, Shannon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So your book is out in May.
It is.
Do you want to plug it?
100 Ideas for Primary Maths. And actually, the cover is behind me. Because that was one thing that Neil Almond said was get the print of your cover behind you. And I was like, well, it's too high up. So I was like, I'm as high as I can go on this chair. So, you know, we've got that in now. Thank you for the opportunity to plug.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there we have it. A truly fascinating chat full of superb insights into the world of primary education and a fitting end to season 1. If you've enjoyed this season, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions for any of my guests, leave a comment and let the conversation continue long into the night. Until next time, until next season no less, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.